A toddler vanishes from a busy playground without a trace, sparking a desperate 48-hour search that ends with a shocking discovery in a park restroom. What they find changes everything. This is a story of fear, hope, and a mother's unbreakable love that will keep you hooked until the very last word. Before we begin, please let me know where you're watching from and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. The sun had barely climbed above the rooftops when Rachel Myers zipped up her son's little hoodie and laced his tiny sneakers. It was one of those crisp spring mornings in Oregon that tricked you into thinking it was warmer than it really was. A cool breeze rattled the new leaves in the maple trees outside her window, and the faint smell of dew and distant pine promised a peaceful Saturday. Rachel tightened the straps on Eli's backpack, though she knew it was more of a formality than a necessity. At just over 3 years old, he didn't really carry anything in it but a crumpled juice box and the plush rabbit he named Mr. Buttons. She glanced down at his round face, already smudged with peanut butter from a rushed breakfast. He was chattering about the ducks at the park and how he hoped they'd be there again today. His voice was light, excited, unburdened by anything but the thoughts of crackers and waddling birds. Rachel smiled, brushing a bit of toast crust from his cheek. "Let's go, buddy. Park's not going to wait for us." Their neighborhood was quiet, tucked into a gentle fold of hills just outside of Salem. The houses were modest but well-kept, the kind of place where folks still waved when they passed by. Rachel had moved here 3 years ago, after Eli was born, fleeing the shadows of an old life she didn't care to look back on. Here, things were simple, safe. At least they had been. By the time they arrived at Cedar Trail Park, the playground was already dotted with a few other early risers. Rachel knew most of them by face, if not by name. A father pushing his twin daughters on the swings. A grandmother carefully peeling an orange beside a stroller. Familiar people, familiar routines. She took a seat on the green bench near the slide, letting Eli bolt toward the climbing frame with a reckless joy only a toddler could muster. Mr. Buttons dangled from his hand as he ran, one ear dragging behind like a worn battle flag. Rachel checked her phone, a habit she was trying to break. One unread message from her sister about dinner next week, a news alert she didn't bother opening, and a missed call from an unknown number. She frowned, then shrugged. Probably spam. She silenced the ringer and slid the phone into her coat pocket, then glanced back toward Eli. He was climbing the red steps, pausing to watch an older boy scale the side ladder. She took a moment to exhale. Her coffee, still warm in the travel mug beside her, steamed gently in the air. There was something so gentle about that moment. The quiet buzz of life, the scent of cut grass, the hollow clang of a swing in motion. She let her eyes close for a second. That second stretched into 30, maybe more. Her phone buzzed again. Instinctively, she pulled it out, saw the screen light up with a new call from her landlord about a leaky pipe, and stood to pace a few steps away so she could hear him over the squeals and chatter. She kept her back turned for what she later swore was less than 2 minutes. When she turned back toward the slide, her heart sank like a stone in cold water. Eli was gone. At first, she didn't panic. Not really. He was likely just ducked behind the play tunnel or chasing a bird toward the bushes like he often did. "Eli," she called, her voice still calm, casual. No answer. She walked quickly to the play structure, peered around the curve of the slide. "Eli, honey, where's Mommy?" Her voice cracked a little. Still no sign. She began to jog, scanning the area, the swings, the sandbox, even the duck pond beyond the path. Nothing. "Eli." This time it was loud. Too loud. People turned to look. A man stood from his bench. A teenager lowered his earbuds. A mother's scream in a park is the kind of sound that yanks people into motion. Rachel's voice sliced through the morning air, and suddenly the playground was no longer calm. A woman rushed over and asked what Eli was wearing. A jogger stopped and offered to check the restrooms. Someone called 911. Rachel's hands trembled as she described her son to the dispatcher. 3 years old, brown hair, green eyes, blue hoodie with a dinosaur on the front. His name is Eli. He had a stuffed rabbit with him, white with a blue ribbon. "Please, just turn around for a second." Within 20 minutes, the park was swarming with police. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze. An officer gently guided Rachel to sit down, Offered her water, she didn't drink. Did you see anyone unfamiliar near your son? Did he ever try to run off before? Any custody issues we should be aware of? The question spun like a tornado around her. Rachel could barely answer. All she could do was keep repeating one sentence, again and again. I only looked away for a moment. The sun rose higher, warming the grass, but to Rachel, the air had turned cold. She couldn't feel her hands, couldn't think beyond the crushing silence where her son's laughter had once been. Somewhere, somehow, Eli had vanished in a park filled with people. No one saw him leave. No one noticed anything strange. And as the first helicopter circled overhead and search dogs began to fan through the wooded trails beyond the swings, Rachel felt something break inside her, a fracture deep and primal. The kind you only feel when something sacred is ripped away. Her baby was gone. They say that time moves differently in a crisis, that minutes stretch into lifetimes and hours pass like smoke. For Rachel Myers, time had lost all meaning the moment Eli disappeared. What had once been a cheerful neighborhood park now resembled a crime scene from a television drama. Except this was no script, and her child wasn't a role being played. This was her reality, raw and merciless. The laughter that once echoed between the trees had fallen into eerie silence, replaced by the crackle of police radios and the low thrum of a drone circling overhead. Detectives arrived quickly, their faces calm and practiced, but even they carried a weight behind their eyes. The lead investigator, a lean woman with gray strands woven through her tight bun, introduced herself as Detective O'Rourke. She knelt beside Rachel, speaking softly, slowly, as though addressing a spooked animal. We're going to do everything we can, but I need your help. Walk me through every second, exactly what happened from the moment you got here. Rachel tried to focus, to summon the details. Her voice trembled as she spoke, her hands shaking in her lap. We got here around 8:45. Eli ran straight to the slide. He had his bunny with him. I sat on the bench, right over there, and I watched him. Then my phone rang. Her voice cracked. I stepped a few feet away. It was just 2 minutes. I swear to you, just 2 minutes. Detective Rourke scribbled notes in a small leather-bound pad, nodding occasionally. Her face remained unreadable. Rachel watched as uniformed officers fanned out across the park, calling Eli's name. Some pushed through the woods, lining the edge of the play area. Others questioned witnesses, their voices hushed but urgent. A K-9 team arrived, and one officer held up a plastic bag with Mr. Buttons inside, recovered from the base of the slide. Rachel's heart twisted at the sight. That bunny had never left Eli's side. Never. If it was here, and Eli wasn't, she couldn't finish the thought. More people arrived. Local volunteers, church friends, and a flood of onlookers drawn by the spectacle of flashing lights. The media followed not long after, camera crews setting up just outside the cordoned-off perimeter. Rachel could hear a reporter rehearsing lines about a missing toddler and a growing search operation, and she wanted to scream. This wasn't just a story. This was her child. Hours passed, though she didn't remember them. At some point, a kind-faced officer brought her coffee she couldn't taste. A paramedic checked her blood pressure and gently suggested she sit in the shade. But Rachel refused to leave. Her legs ached. Her lips cracked from the dry wind. Still, she stayed rooted to the bench, eyes fixed on the playground as if Eli might suddenly reappear on the monkey bars with a mischievous grin, saying, "I was just hiding, Mommy." But he didn't. By late afternoon, the sun dipped behind a bank of clouds, and the air took on a chill. Police had interviewed over a dozen witnesses, parents, joggers, elderly dog walkers. No one had seen a struggle. No one had heard a scream. No one saw Eli walk away. It was as if he had evaporated, vanished into thin air. The thought made Rachel sick. Detective Rourke returned, crouching beside her again. We've pulled surveillance footage from a few homes near the park. One camera caught something, a dark SUV, maybe a Suburban or a Tahoe, slowing down near the main entrance around 8:52. Can't get a plate. We're enhancing the image now, but she hesitated. No visible child. Doesn't mean much yet, but it's a lead. Rachel stared at her, the words sinking in slowly. You think someone took him? Her voice was barely a whisper. "We don't know. It's possible, but we're not ruling anything out." The detective stood, offering a faint nod. "I need to ask. You said Eli's father isn't in the picture?" Rachel stiffened. She had been dreading this question. "Jeremy and I haven't spoken in over 3 years. He was unstable, violent. He doesn't even know where we live. I changed everything. Phone numbers, city, even our names on some documents. Has he ever tried to contact you?" "Not once." Detective Rourke made another note. "We'll be checking into him as well." Rachel looked down at her hands, which were clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She didn't want to believe Jeremy could be involved, but the thought clawed at her. He had always said that if she took his son, he'd never stop looking. Had he found them? Had he been watching? She swallowed hard, while rising in her throat. As evening approached, search teams moved into a wider radius, combing through drainage ditches, behind maintenance sheds, into thickets of trees and brush. A helicopter buzzed overhead, scanning with thermal cameras. Volunteers passed out flyers with Eli's photo and description. Brown hair, green eyes, dinosaur hoodie. 3 years old. Missing since 9 a.m. And still nothing. Rachel's sister, Monica, arrived from Portland that night. She wrapped her arms around Rachel without a word. The two women cried together on the park bench, their tears falling onto the dry earth. Rachel didn't sleep. She refused to leave. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Eli's face, smiling as he ran up those red steps. And then, nothing. Just empty space. By the time the first full day ended, the case had already begun to make national headlines. Toddler disappears without a trace. Mother turned away for seconds. No leads, no suspects. The coverage was cruel, dissecting her grief in sound bites and captions. But Rachel didn't care about the cameras or the whispers. All she cared about was the fact that her son, her baby, was out there somewhere, cold, scared, maybe worse, and she had no way to reach him. As the sky turned dark and the playground stood empty under a growing moon, Rachel sat alone on that bench, numb and trembling, whispering the same quiet prayer over and over. "Please bring him back. Please bring him back." The second morning rose gray and unforgiving. Heavy clouds hung low over Salem, casting a dull pall over the city as if the sky itself were mourning. Rachel hadn't gone home. She had refused every offer, friends, family, even police officers gently insisting she needed rest. But how could a mother sleep when her child was missing? She had stayed in the parking lot through the night, wrapped in a blanket Monica brought from her car, her eyes scanning the dark trees like they might cough up a miracle before dawn. The search began again at first light. More volunteers had shown up than anyone expected, dozens, maybe hundreds, crowding around folding tables set up beside the tennis courts. Someone had printed new flyers overnight. Eli's face stared out from every tree trunk, every lamppost, every car window. Soft brown hair, green eyes wide with innocence, the faintest hint of baby fat still clinging to his cheeks. Missing, age 3, last seen wearing a blue hoodie with a green dinosaur. Rachel couldn't bear to look at them for long. Seeing his picture like that made it feel too final, like the world had already accepted he was gone. Detective Rourke returned, more businesslike today, her clipboard full, her team working at a relentless pace. "We've expanded the search grid to 5 square miles. Still no new sightings. We're working with tech to scrub video feeds from local businesses, but no matches yet." Her tone remained even, steady, but her eyes betrayed fatigue. "We've also issued an Amber Alert to every phone in the state." Rachel could still hear the echo of that emergency tone, that shrill, heart-stopping buzz that had gone out late the previous night. She had watched as people checked their phones, saw the alert, and looked around, dazed. For a brief second, everyone in Oregon knew her son's name. She had clung to that thought like a rope in water. Monica took over managing the flood of concerned friends and neighbors. She coordinated food deliveries, phone calls, and statements to the press, trying to shield Rachel from the worst of the chaos. "Let me handle this," she kept saying. "You just focus on staying strong." But Rachel didn't feel strong. She felt hollow. Like every breath she took was borrowed. By mid-morning, the FBI had joined the investigation. Two agents in dark jackets stood beside Rourke as she gave them a rundown, their expressions unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses. Rachel was told this was standard in child abduction cases. Just another layer of support, they said. But to her, it felt like a silent alarm had been triggered, the kind they don't announce unless they think something very bad has happened. The agents asked Rachel to walk them through her morning again. This time they recorded her voice, noting every hesitation, every quiver. Did Eli have any hiding spots? Had he ever wandered off before? Anyone in your life showing unusual interest in him recently? She answered everything truthfully. She had nothing to hide. But when they began asking about Jeremy again, his background, his past behavior, their breakup, Rachel's stomach twisted. She could feel judgment hiding behind their polite tone, like a storm behind clouds. I left him because he was dangerous, she said quietly. I did everything I could to disappear. New address. New job. I didn't even tell my best friend where we went. She looked down. I thought I was keeping Eli safe. Agent Henderson made a note without replying. The other agent nodded slightly. We'll dig into it. Meanwhile, the community continued to mobilize. Local businesses offered printing services for flyers. Restaurants donated meals to the searchers, and teenagers formed groups to comb the trails with flashlights. A retired firefighter organized a grid search of the surrounding woods, coordinating with police to cover every inch of terrain. People Rachel had never met came up to hug her, to cry with her, to whisper promises that they wouldn't stop until her boy was home. Despite it all, no one found anything new. No hoodie, no footprints, no clues. The first false lead came just before noon. A woman in the next town overcalled in a tip. Said she'd seen a boy matching Eli's description at a gas station. Officers responded immediately. Surveillance footage showed a child in a similar blue hoodie, but closer inspection revealed it wasn't him. Rachel had barely let herself hope before the news crushed her again. She broke down sobbing beside a picnic table, clutching Mr. Buttons to her chest. The rabbit now carried the scent of pine and fear in her son's absence. Throughout the afternoon, the media presence grew. News vans lined the street, reporters standing beneath umbrellas as the first light drizzle began to fall. One woman from a national network asked Rachel for an interview. Monica intervened before Rachel could speak. Not now, she snapped. She hasn't eaten, hasn't slept. Let her be a mother, not a headline. By late evening, morale among the volunteers was thinning. People still showed up, still helped, but there was a subtle shift. The exhaustion was beginning to weigh on everyone. Rachel could see it in their eyes, in the way they avoided looking at her too long, as if they feared what they might see. That night, Rachel finally agreed to go home for a few hours. Monica drove her, though Rachel spent most of the ride staring blankly out the window. The house felt foreign now, like a stage set without its actors. Eli's toys lay scattered on the rug where he'd left them. His sippy cup still sat on the kitchen counter. The air was still, too still. She collapsed on the couch, clutching the blanket Eli used during naps. The smell of his baby shampoo still clung to it. Rachel buried her face in the fabric and wept, her sobs muffled and raw. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. She imagined his voice calling out in the dark. "Mommy, where are you?" As she drifted into a shallow, haunted sleep, the only sound in the room was the quiet ticking of the wall clock, and somewhere far away, a silence that felt like a scream waiting to be heard. The morning of the third day broke with a strange stillness, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Rachel awoke on the couch, her body aching with a cold that had settled into her bones. She barely remembered falling asleep, only that she had wept until her tears dried and her throat burned. The house was silent, too silent, the kind that screamed with absence. Monica had left a note on the kitchen table, back at the park with search teams. Call if you need anything. But Rachel didn't want to call anyone. What she wanted was her son, his tiny footsteps padding across the floor, his laugh echoing through the hallway, the weight of him climbing in her lap. She sat motionless for nearly an hour before she finally stood, changed her clothes, and headed back to the park. The drive was a blur. Familiar streets twisted into strange shapes. Traffic lights blinked slowly, as though they too were exhausted from the weight of so much hope and grief. When she arrived, the scene was quieter than before. Fewer volunteers, more police. The rain had stopped during the night, but left everything damp and gray, the ground soaked and soft underfoot. Detective Rourke was waiting near the swing set, her expression tight, eyes shadowed with something Rachel couldn't read. As soon as Rachel stepped onto the mulch path, the detective moved toward her with careful, deliberate steps. "We found something," she said quietly, leading Rachel away from the crowd. About 20 minutes ago, one of the officers rechecked the South Side restroom facility. It had already been cleared on the first day, but this time was different. Rachel's stomach dropped. She tried to speak, but found she couldn't. Rourke continued. Inside the second stall on the far end, behind the toilet tank, someone had left something wedged into the wall. She paused. It was Eli's sock, blue with little stars. Dirty, damp, but unmistakable. The words knocked the breath from Rachel's lungs. She knew that sock. She had folded that pair herself just days ago, tucked it into his tiny drawer. Her mind screamed with questions, but her voice came out barely above a whisper. "How did they miss it the first time?" "We think it was placed there afterward," Rourke said, voice low and steady. "The stall was cleaned 2 days ago. Someone returned, maybe last night. Slipped in, left it there, left no trace." Rachel's knees weakened. She reached for the nearest bench, her legs no longer trusting themselves to hold her up. "He's alive?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Please tell me this means he's alive." "We don't know yet, but it's a sign. And it's recent." Rourke crouched beside her. "We're combing the building for DNA, fingerprints, anything. We're also checking surveillance footage again, focusing on anyone who might have entered the restroom overnight." And Rachel, she hesitated. This could mean he's still close. Maybe the person who took him wants us to find him, but on their terms. Rachel stared out across the park, her thoughts spiraling. Who would do this? Who would steal a child, then drop a breadcrumb like this? Deliberate taunting? The idea twisted her insides. It was a game to them, wasn't it? Some sick game where Eli was a pawn, and she was meant to suffer through every moment. Within hours, the discovery was broadcast. News outlets seized on the headline. "Clue found in restroom in missing toddler case." The footage showed the restroom cordoned off with yellow police tape, officers entering with gloves and cameras. A local forensic unit dusted the metal surfaces. Reporters speculated on the meaning of the sock. Was it hope or horror? Proof of life or a message from a predator? Monica found Rachel sitting in the shade near the jungle gym, her face pale, her hands wrapped tightly around a thermos of untouched coffee. She sat beside her silently. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Rachel whispered, "What kind of person does this? What kind of person takes a baby and leaves a sock like a calling card?" Monica placed a hand over hers. "The kind of person who makes mistakes," she said gently. "And maybe, just maybe, that mistake is how we find him." That afternoon, the FBI set up a mobile command center near the baseball field. Agents interviewed everyone again, every jogger, every mother, every maintenance worker who had been near the restroom building. One man, a groundskeeper named Carl Jennings, remembered seeing a dark figure near the south facility around midnight 2 nights earlier, but he assumed it was a homeless person and hadn't reported it. Rachel clung to the timeline. Midnight. The sock was planted overnight. Someone had returned, right under their noses. She imagined them slipping through the trees in the dark, clutching a child's sock in their fist, heart pounding. Had Eli been with them? Had he cried? Had he watched as they pushed the sock into the crack behind the tank? As dusk approached, Rachel stood at the edge of the playground, staring at the restroom's shadowed outline. A sick feeling settled in her gut. Whoever had done this was watching. She could feel it. There was a method to the madness, a cruel pattern emerging. They weren't just hiding Eli. They were toying with her. But something else stirred in her too. Something sharp, fragile, and stubborn. It was hope. Bitter and painful, but hope nonetheless. Eli's sock meant he had been there, maybe recently. He was out there, somewhere, breathing the same air, waiting. That changed everything. Later that night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She sat upright in bed, her hands clenching and unclenching as she stared at the ceiling. Her thoughts circled endlessly. What if this was the beginning of something? What if the sock was only the first clue, and more were coming? Her phone buzzed beside her on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number appeared. "You're getting warmer. Don't stop looking." Rachel froze. The screen stayed lit, glowing like an open wound in the dark. Her breath caught in her throat. Someone was playing a very dangerous game. The glow of the phone screen burned into Rachel's eyes like a brand. Her breath was frozen in her chest, suspended between disbelief and terror. She read the message again. "You're getting warmer. Don't stop looking." 5 words, no punctuation, no signature. Just a voice emerging from the black void. For a full minute, she couldn't move. Her mind raced through possibilities. Was it a cruel prank? Some deranged person following the news? Or was it real? Was it from the person who had her son? Her thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. She dared not reply, afraid she might spook them or invite more madness. Instead, she called Detective Rourke. "Don't touch anything else," Rourke instructed sharply. "Forward the message. I'm sending someone over immediately." Within 20 minutes, 2 officers arrived at the house, followed by a digital forensic expert. Rachel sat on the couch, her body curled tightly into itself, watching as the tech took photos of the phone, copied the message, and extracted metadata. He wore blue gloves, as if afraid her pain might be contagious. Rourke showed up shortly after, face grim but alert. "We've traced the number to a burner phone," she said after a quick sidebar with the technician. "No registração, no GPS history, no traceable sim. It's been powered on just long enough to send that message and nothing else." Rachel swallowed. "So it's them. It has to be. We're treating it that way," Rourke replied. "We'll pull every traffic camera within a mile of any local cell tower that might have caught the signal. But if they're smart enough to use a burner, they're smart enough to avoid being seen." Rachel closed her eyes, pain rising like a tide. "Why would they contact me now?" After 2 days of silence, Rourke hesitated, then sat beside her. "Because they want something, and if this is who we think it is, they're playing a long game. This message wasn't meant to inform, it was meant to manipulate." Rachel knew she was right. Whoever sent that text had done so with precision, with timing, with purpose. The sock in the restroom was the first breadcrumb. The message was the next. Someone was leading her, drawing her forward step by step, as if this were a trail she had to follow alone. Later that day, the FBI sent in a behavioral analyst, a quiet, thoughtful man named Dr. Silas Gray. He didn't ask Rachel the same questions everyone else had. Instead, he sat with her in the quiet of her kitchen and gently inquired about her memories, emotions, dreams. He asked how Eli handled strangers, what his favorite hiding games were, whether he liked to wander or cling. Rachel, exhausted but grateful, found herself talking more than she expected about Eli's fear of the dark, his love for frogs, the way he sang to himself when he played. Dr. Gray nodded, making small notes. "This isn't random," he said finally. "The sock, the message, this isn't opportunistic. It's ritualistic. They're constructing a narrative, one you're meant to follow. They're not just taking your child, they're making you part of their design." Rachel stared at him. "Why?" He looked at her, eyes dark and steady. "Because that's the only way this person feels control. This isn't about money. It's about power." The words sank into her like stones. That evening, Monica returned to check on her. She brought groceries, soup, and a pair of fresh pajamas she'd picked up from Rachel's house. Rachel had barely touched food since the morning of the disappearance, but Monica coaxed her into sipping the broth, sitting with her while silence filled the corners of the living room. "I don't know how to keep going," Rachel whispered. "Every time I think I've hit bottom, it gets deeper. I don't know where the end is." Monica's hand covered hers. "There is no end. Not until he's back. And even after that, you keep going because he's your son. Because he's waiting." Later that night, as Monica dozed on the armchair and Rachel tried in vain to sleep, her phone buzzed again. Her body jolted upright. Another unknown number. Another message. "Do you remember what you did?" "Because I do." Rachel's pulse crashed like a cymbal. Her fingers gripped the phone, shaking. These weren't just taunts. They were personal. This wasn't about Eli alone. This was about her. Someone out there knew her. Knew something. Her mind jumped to Jeremy, her ex. His face, his rage, the things he'd whispered when she finally left him for good. But the restraining order had held for over a year. He hadn't come near them. Could he have waited, plotted, and now returned with this unthinkable vengeance? She showed the message to Rourke the next morning. The detective's jaw tensed. "They're escalating," she said. "This message implies history, anger, resentment, memory, and guilt." Rachel closed her eyes. "I was just trying to protect my son." Rourke nodded. "We need to dig deeper. Every relationship, every conflict, every thread. Whoever's behind this, they're not just hiding. They're circling, and they want you to feel it." Meanwhile, search efforts began to shift focus. With the evidence pointing toward deliberate psychological manipulation, law enforcement broadened the net, cross-checking old restraining orders, domestic disputes, even therapists and schools. Anyone who had a connection to Rachel or Eli became part of the inquiry. As the sun began to set on the third day, Rachel found herself standing at the edge of the park again, staring at the playground, now cordoned off with yellow tape. It looked abandoned, forgotten, the kind of place ghosts might play. She pulled Mr. Buttons from her coat pocket, clutched him against her chest, and whispered, "I don't know who you are, but I swear to God, I'll find you." And from somewhere beyond the trees, she thought she heard it again. A whisper on the wind. "Mommy." The fading light of the afternoon was soft but heavy, casting long shadows across the playground that had become a cage of memories and dread. Rachel stood motionless at the edge of the yellow tape, clutching the worn fabric of Mr. Buttons, Eli's beloved stuffed frog. The park was eerily quiet now, the laughter of children replaced by the steady hum of police radios and distant murmurs of volunteers. Her heart pounded as a chill drifted over her skin, and then she thought she heard it, faint, almost imperceptible, carried by the wind. A small voice calling her name, "Mommy." The sound was so fragile, so fleeting, Rachel doubted at first if her mind was playing tricks. But the whisper felt real, like a thread stretching from the dark edges of the park into her very soul. She closed her eyes, tears spilling freely. Could it be Eli? Could he be here, somewhere close, reaching out through the silence? Her thoughts spiraled. The sock in the restroom, the ominous messages, the stranger's cruel game. All of it seemed to converge in this moment, a cruel puzzle with pieces she struggled to hold on to. Rachel's legs trembled, but she refused to step back. Instead, she took a slow, steady breath, willing herself to focus. If Eli was out there, scared and alone, she had to find him. Not just for herself, but for him. Detective Rourke approached quietly, her gaze steady but soft. "You heard it, didn't you?" she asked. Rachel nodded, unable to speak. Sometimes the mind reaches for hope in the darkest places. But sometimes, she paused, looking around the empty playground, sometimes it's more than hope. Rachel searched Rourke's eyes and saw a flicker of something she hadn't noticed before, a shared pain, a fierce determination. "We're doing everything we can," Rourke promised. "And we have a lead." The lead was Carl Jennings, the groundskeeper who had mentioned seeing a figure near the restroom at midnight. Rourke revealed they had brought him in for questioning again. Carl was cooperative, but nervous. He described a man in a dark hoodie, moving quickly, glancing over his shoulder as if afraid to be seen. The description fit no one known to Rachel, deepening the mystery of who might want to hurt her son. Rachel's phone buzzed again, another message from the unknown number. This one was different. A single photo. She stared at it, stomach twisting. It was a blurry shot of the playground restroom exterior, taken from across the park at dusk. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, was a small figure standing just outside the door, clutching something that looked like a child's hand. Her breath caught. That figure was small, too small for an adult, but too big to be anything but a person. Was it Eli? Was it someone else? She couldn't tell. She showed the photo to Rourke and the FBI team. They exchanged grim looks. "This changes things," Rourke said. "They want you to know your son is here. They want you to see him, even if only from a distance." Rachel's chest tightened with a mixture of hope and fear. She felt the cruel weight of the trap tightening around them. As night fell, the park transformed into a place of shadows and whispered fears. Search teams spread out with flashlights, dogs sniffing the damp earth. Rachel stayed nearby, watching, praying. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of damp leaves and cold earth. Every rustle, every crack of a twig made her heart leap. Inside her mind, she replayed every detail, the sock, the messages, the photo, the whisper. Each was a thread in a dark tapestry woven by someone who knew her pain intimately. She understood now. This was not random. It was deliberate. The kidnapper was playing a game of control, tormenting her with false hope and fear, forcing her to chase shadows in the night. But Rachel's resolve hardened. She whispered back to the wind, "Eli, I'm coming for you. Hold on. Please hold on." That night, sleep eluded her. She sat by the window, watching the moon rise over the empty playground. Somewhere in the darkness, she believed her son was waiting, and she would not rest until she found him. The night stretched long and silent. The world outside Rachel's window, cloaked in darkness, but inside her mind, a storm raged unchecked. Every creak of the house, every distant siren, felt like a signal, something to decipher, a code from the unseen enemy who held her son. She barely slept, instead tracing over the details of the day, memorizing every face, every word spoken, every fleeting clue. The photo on her phone haunted her, a small figure near the restroom, holding a hand, frozen in a blurry snapshot that spoke volumes despite its vagueness. Rachel knew this was no accident. It was a message, a signpost left by someone who wanted her to know Eli was still alive, still within reach. Detective Rourke had reassured her repeatedly, but Rachel's trust was brittle, shattered by grief and fear. The police were doing their best, yet the kidnapper's game was intricate and cruel. The messages kept coming, cryptic, threatening, pushing Rachel further into a labyrinth of anxiety. Each text felt like a thread, pulling her closer to the edge of hope and despair. She understood now that whoever was behind this was watching her every move, controlling her world from the shadows. That night, as the wind howled through the trees surrounding the park, a faint sound caught Rachel's attention. It was a soft tapping, irregular but distinct, like fingers drumming on glass. Heart pounding, she opened her front door cautiously. The street was empty, bathed in pale moonlight. But near the curb, illuminated by a flickering street lamp, lay a small, wrapped bundle. Hands trembling, Rachel picked it up and untied the knot. Inside was a tattered blanket, Eli's favorite, the one she had knitted herself, the one he always carried. Her breath hitched. How could the kidnapper send such a token? Was it a taunt or a sign of mercy? Detective Rourke arrived minutes later, her face grave. "This changes everything," she said softly, examining the blanket. "They want to keep you connected, to make sure you don't give up." Rachel nodded, tears streaming silently. The blanket was proof that Eli was alive, proof that the nightmare was far from over. Over the next few hours, search efforts intensified. Volunteers scoured the wooded areas beyond the playground, flashlights slicing through underbrush, voices calling Eli's name into the night. Rachel joined them when she could, her exhaustion forgotten in the surge of maternal desperation. Every shadow seemed to move, every rustle in the dark set her nerves on edge. Yet despite the fear, there was a flicker of hope, a fragile flame she guarded fiercely. Amidst the search, the FBI's behavioral analyst, Dr. Silas Gray, made a startling suggestion. Based on the kidnapper's pattern, he believed they might be close to understanding the perpetrator's mindset, a person obsessed with control, manipulation, and power. He urged Rachel to remember everything about her past, every conflict, every moment of vulnerability. Sometimes, he explained, these crimes come from the darkest corners of our lives, from people we know or once knew. Rachel's thoughts immediately turned to Jeremy, her ex-husband. Though restraining orders had kept him away, his temper and jealousy had once been a storm. Could he have orchestrated this, lurking in silence, waiting for the right moment to strike? The possibility sent a cold shiver through her spine. As dawn approached, Rachel sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, waiting. Another message arrived, a riddle this time. The key lies where water flows, but shadows hide the truth. She reread it slowly, mind racing. Was it the restroom? The creek that ran behind the park? Or somewhere else entirely? The cryptic clue promised answers, but demanded more puzzles to be solved. Rourke and her team took the message seriously. They mapped the park and its surroundings, noting places where water met shadow. Search parties were redirected to the creek banks and drainage tunnels, areas often overlooked in daylight, but perfect for hiding someone small and vulnerable. Rachel accompanied the team, the cold morning air biting at her skin, but inside, her spirit burned. She was no longer just a mother searching. She was a warrior fighting through fear and uncertainty. Every step taken along the muddy banks was a promise to Eli. She would find him, no matter what. Hours passed with little progress, but then a faint cry echoed through the trees. Rachel's heart leapt. The searchers converged on the sound, flashlights piercing the gloom. There, tangled in a thicket near the creek, was a small bundle of clothes. But no Eli. Frustration mingled with heartbreak as the team pressed on, their search growing more desperate. Yet Rachel refused to surrender. Somewhere in the dark, the truth waited, elusive, hidden, but not beyond reach. The night's shadows deepened, but so did Rachel's resolve. She whispered into the cold air, "Hold on, Eli. Mommy's coming." The early morning fog clung thickly to the trees, weaving a ghostly shroud over the park as Rachel joined the renewed search with a restless urgency. Her body ached from sleepless hours, but her mind was sharper than ever, focused like a laser on the cryptic clue left in the message. The key lies where water flows, but shadows hide the truth. The phrase haunted her, twisting in her thoughts, begging for meaning. The creek behind the playground, usually a placid trickle, had become the center of their investigation. But Rachel knew the park's landscape well, and she sensed there was more to uncover, something beneath the surface, hidden in the shadows where most eyes would not look. Detective Rourke organized teams to scour every inch of the creek bed and the drainage tunnels. But it was Rachel who insisted on searching the old maintenance shed near the restroom. The building was rarely used and often forgotten, a place where water pipes ran through and shadows stretched long and dark. As she pushed open the creaking door, the stale smell of damp and rust hit her immediately. Inside, the dim light filtered through dusty windows, illuminating forgotten tools and cracked paint peeling from walls. Rachel's breath quickened as her eyes caught a faint glimmer near the floor, a small, folded piece of paper wedged under a loose floorboard. She picked it up carefully, her fingers trembling. The paper was old, stained, but still legible. It was a crude map of the park, marked with symbols that looked like coordinates or a code. In the corner, a single word was scrawled in shaky handwriting: Eli. Her heart hammered. This was no coincidence. Whoever had left the note wanted her to find it, a breadcrumb on the path to her son. But the map was cryptic, unfamiliar. It wasn't drawn by an expert, but by someone desperate, or maybe someone playing with her emotions. Rachel's phone buzzed again with another message, this time a voice recording. She hesitated, then pressed play. A child's voice whispered, "Mommy, help me." The words cut through her like a knife. Tears streamed freely down her face. The voice was unmistakably Eli's, weak, frightened, but alive. The message ended abruptly, leaving a haunting silence that filled the room. Rachel clutched the phone, barely able to breathe. Detective Rourke arrived just then, sensing the gravity of the moment. "This changes everything," she said softly, placing a hand on Rachel's shoulder. "He's alive, and he's trying to reach you." The words carried hope, but also a chilling reminder that time was running out. The FBI analysts immediately began decoding the map, cross-referencing it with GPS coordinates and aerial photos. They suspected the markings pointed to a hidden spot near the creek, possibly a small cave or an abandoned utility tunnel, places where someone could hide without being seen. Rachel's mind raced with possibilities, but the fear gnawed at her relentlessly. What if Eli was trapped somewhere too dangerous to reach? What if the kidnapper was watching them now, waiting to see how far she would go? Despite the danger, Rachel was determined. She volunteered to accompany the search team to the suspected location. They waded through muddy banks, the cold water seeping through their boots, following the map's directions as best they could. The sun rose higher, burning away the fog and casting harsh light on the tangled underbrush and rocks. The tension was palpable, every step heavy with silent prayer. Finally, they reached the edge of a narrow tunnel concealed by vines and fallen branches. The entrance was small, but just large enough for a child to crawl through. Rachel knelt beside it, her voice trembling as she called softly, "Eli, it's Mommy. Can you hear me?" No answer came, but she felt a flicker of something. Hope, maybe, or the echo of her own desperation. The search team prepared to explore the tunnel, flashlights piercing the darkness inside. Rachel's heart pounded so loudly she feared Eli might hear it and know she was close. As they moved cautiously into the shadows, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a miracle or a tragedy. Rachel's hands clenched tightly around Mr. Button's, her silent promise to never stop searching. This was the moment where everything would change. Somewhere within the darkness, her son was waiting, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The moment the flashlight beams cut through the darkness of the narrow tunnel, a chill ran down Rachel's spine. The air was thick and stale, carrying the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic, an odor that set her nerves on edge. The search team moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled against the cold stone floor, echoing softly in the confined space. Rachel followed, clutching Mr. Buttons tightly, the only piece of Eli she had left in her trembling hands. Every sound seemed amplified. Dripping water, the rustle of small creatures scurrying away, the distant, almost imperceptible creak of old pipes. The walls felt as if they were closing in, the shadows twisting into shapes her mind desperately tried to deny. She whispered Eli's name again, voice cracking, hope and fear battling within her. Minutes passed like hours as the team advanced deeper into the tunnel. Rachel's heart pounded relentlessly, each beat a frantic drum of desperate prayer. Then a sudden sound, a faint whimper, soft but unmistakable, echoed from ahead. The group froze. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. "Eli," she called out, voice trembling but urgent. Another whimper answered her, closer this time. Tears blurred her vision, but she pushed forward, led by the sound. Finally, in a small alcove barely big enough for a child, they found him, huddled, shivering, clutching a tattered blanket, eyes wide with fear but alive. Rachel's knees buckled, and she collapsed beside him, holding him as if to never let go. "Mommy's here, Eli," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've got you." His small hands grasped hers tightly, grounding her in the miracle of the moment. The team quickly radioed from medical support, and Rachel's relief was overwhelming, mixed with exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. But in that tunnel, surrounded by darkness and fear, the light of hope burned brighter than ever. Eli's eyes, filled with trust and fragile courage, told her that despite everything, he had survived, and so had she. The ambulance lights flashed softly in the morning haze as paramedics carefully lifted Eli onto a stretcher. Rachel's hands never left his small body, feeling the fragile pulse that anchored him to this world. The hospital was a blur of antiseptic smells, beeping machines, and hurried footsteps, but Rachel's focus remained fixed solely on her son. Doctors moved quickly, checking for injuries, dehydration, and exhaustion. But physically Eli was remarkably unharmed, though the trauma that clung to his eyes told a story far deeper than any scan could reveal. Rachel sat by his bedside, brushing damp hair from his forehead, whispering promises of safety and love. Days passed in a fragile bubble of recovery, where every small smile from Eli felt like a victory, a patch mended on their shattered lives. Yet beneath the relief, Rachel battled a storm of emotions. Guilt for the moment she let him slip away, anger at the unknown tormentor, and a raw, aching hope for a future they could rebuild. Detective Rourke remained close, unraveling the threads of the kidnapping, tracing calls, and piecing together clues that might lead to the person responsible. It was clear now that Eli's disappearance was no random act, but a carefully orchestrated nightmare. Therapy sessions began, gentle conversations designed to help Eli express the confusion and fear locked inside him. His tiny voice sometimes faltered, but each word was a step toward healing, a bridge between past terror and a hopeful tomorrow. Rachel held onto those moments, knowing that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but grateful beyond measure that her son was home. Community support flooded in, neighbors bringing meals, friends offering quiet prayers, strangers sending cards and messages of hope. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, kindness endured, weaving a safety net around a family reborn. Rachel vowed to never let Eli out of her sight again, to protect him fiercely against a world that had shown its cruelest face. Still, questions lingered, shadows in the bright light of reunion. Who had taken Eli? Why? And most haunting of all, could they strike again? Rachel knew the answers lay buried somewhere in the tangled web of this nightmare, and she was ready to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. Her son was safe now, but the story was far from over. As the days stretched on, Rachel's relief was shadowed by a growing need to understand the why and how of Eli's disappearance. Detective Rourke's investigation was relentless, piecing together fragmented evidence and following up on every lead, but it was Rachel who stumbled upon a crucial clue herself, an old diary hidden among Eli's belongings. The faded pages told stories of her past, painful memories, and long-forgotten conflicts that suddenly cast new light on the nightmare she had endured. Each entry whispered secrets Rachel thought were buried forever, secrets that pointed towards someone from her history, someone whose jealousy and bitterness might have spiraled into obsession. The diary revealed a relationship with a former friend, Karen, whose kindness had masked darker intentions. Rachel recalled subtle threats, unexplained confrontations, and a simmering resentment that had once unsettled her but was dismissed in the busyness of life. Could Karen be the kidnapper? The thought sent a shiver through Rachel's spine, mingling shock with a painful sense of betrayal. How had she missed these signs? And more terrifying, how far would Karen go to exact revenge? Detective Rourke moved quickly, contacting Karen's family and tracing her recent whereabouts. The search revealed a trail of instability, sudden moves, erratic behavior, and disturbing social media posts hinting at fixation with Rachel's life. As the pieces fell into place, the chilling truth emerged. Karen had been watching, waiting, and planning for months, orchestrating the disappearance to shatter Rachel's world. Faced with this revelation, Rachel grappled with conflicting emotions, fear, anger, and a desperate longing for closure. The woman she once trusted had become a nightmare incarnate, a shadow lurking just beyond the edges of her life. But Rachel was no longer helpless. With support from law enforcement and her community, she vowed to confront the darkness head-on, to protect Eli and reclaim her peace. The investigation gained momentum, and as Rachel prepared for what lay ahead, she found strength in unexpected places, in the resilience of a mother's love, in the kindness of strangers, and in the quiet hope that truth, no matter how painful, could finally bring freedom. Rachel sat quietly in the sterile conference room, the weight of anticipation pressing down on her like a physical force. Detective Rourke had arranged a meeting with Karen, the woman whose name had become synonymous with betrayal and pain. As the door creaked open, Rachel's heart pounded fiercely, every nerve alight with a tumult of emotions, fear, anger, and an aching sorrow she hadn't dared fully acknowledge until now. Karen entered, her eyes shadowed by guilt and something darker, defiance masked in fragile apology. The years of suppressed tension cracked open in that room, a collision of past grievances and present horrors. Karen's voice trembled as she spoke, offering explanations tangled in regret and twisted justifications. She claimed loneliness, jealousy, and a desperate need for control had driven her to orchestrate Eli's disappearance. The confession was a jagged shard cutting through Rachel's soul, yet beneath the pain was a fierce determination to understand why someone she once trusted could inflict such damage. The two women exchanged bitter truths and shattered memories, revealing wounds that ran far deeper than the surface. But Rachel's priority remained clear: protecting Eli and ensuring this nightmare ended. She listened as Karen detailed the kidnapping, the careful planning, the hiding places, the messages meant to torment, but ultimately to lure Rachel to the truth. Each word was a piece of a puzzle that had haunted Rachel's days and nights, now coming into painful focus. The dialogue was a catharsis, a painful reckoning that stirred both rage and a strange sense of closure. Outside the room, officers prepared for Karen's arrest, the final step in a journey that had upended lives. Rachel felt the weight of years lifting, replaced by cautious hope. She knew healing would be a long path, but this confrontation was a pivotal moment, proof that light could penetrate even the darkest shadows. Eli's safe return was the beginning, not the end of their story. And as Rachel left the room, she felt an unspoken promise to herself and her son. No matter what lay ahead, they would face it together, stronger than ever. The weeks that followed Karen's arrest unfolded like a fragile dawn breaking over a storm-tossed sea. Rachel found herself navigating a delicate balance between relief and the daunting task of rebuilding a life shattered by fear and betrayal. Eli, once so silent and withdrawn, began to blossom in small, hopeful ways. A shy smile here, a playful laugh there, each milestone a testament to resilience and the power of love. Rachel clung to those moments with a fierce gratitude, knowing that healing was not linear, but a journey marked by courage and patience. Community support remained a steady undercurrent, neighbors and friends stepping in with meals, visits, and quiet encouragement. Rachel's own strength surprised her. The pain she had carried now fueled a fierce determination to protect her family and help others facing similar nightmares. She began volunteering with local organizations dedicated to child safety and victim support, transforming her trauma into a mission of hope. The park, once a place of loss, slowly regained its place in her heart as a symbol of survival and renewal. Though scars remained, unseen yet deeply felt, Rachel found peace in the knowledge that she had fought through darkness and emerged stronger. Eli's laughter filled their home once more, a healing balm that soothed the deepest wounds. And while the shadows of the past lingered, they no longer controlled her life. With each passing day, Rachel rewrote their story, one of courage, love, and unbreakable bonds. The nightmare had ended, but their journey toward light and hope had only just begun. The sun set gently over the quiet neighborhood, casting a golden glow over the playground where Eli had vanished so long ago. Rachel stood at the edge of the swings, watching her son run freely, laughter ringing through the air like a fragile hymn of hope reborn. The pain of those harrowing days never fully faded, but it had transformed, becoming a part of her story, a reminder of strength found in the darkest moments and the unyielding power of a mother's love. Rachel had learned that healing was not forgetting, but embracing the past with courage, using it to forge a future brighter than she ever dared imagine. In the years since the nightmare, Rachel and Eli had grown inseparable, their bond unbreakable and deepened by everything they had endured. She had become an advocate, her voice carrying the weight of experience, helping others who faced similar fears. The community, once shaken, had rallied around families like hers, fostering a network of vigilance and compassion that ensured no child would be left vulnerable again. Through her work, Rachel found purpose beyond her pain, a lasting legacy born from tragedy but rooted in hope. On a crisp autumn afternoon, a small ceremony was held at the park. A bench was dedicated to Eli's safe return, engraved with a simple message: for every child, a place of safety and love. As Rachel placed a hand on the cool wood, tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude and peace. The nightmare that began with a single moment of loss had ended with a community united, a mother's love triumphant, and a future full of promise. And as Eli's laughter danced on the breeze, Rachel knew that no darkness could ever extinguish the light they had fought so fiercely to reclaim. Thank you so much for joining me on this emotional journey today. Stories like Rachel and Eli's remind us of the incredible strength of love, hope, and community, even in the darkest moments. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss more heartfelt stories like this one. Don't forget to like the video. It really helps us reach more people who might need a little hope today. I'd love to hear your thoughts or personal stories in the comments below. Sharing together makes us stronger. Thank you again for listening, and I can't wait to connect with you in the next story.